Nice buns, soft, fluffy, and ultra-low net carbs. Discover Hero Bread, the delicious ultra-low net carb bread with incredible taste and texture. Hero Bread has 0 grams of sugar and is under 100 calories per serving. Plus, high in fiber with 5 to 10 grams of protein per serving. Available on Amazon.com, Walmart.com, and at hero.co. That's HERO.co. Delicious, ultra-low net carb Hero Bread buns and tortillas. Soft and fluffy, high in fiber, and with 0 grams of sugar, up to 10 grams of protein, coming in at under 100 calories. Order today at hero.co and use the code AH10 to get 10% off your first purchase. That's AH10 at hero.co. HERO.co. Order from hero.co now and get 10% off your first purchase with promo code AH10. That's 10% off with code AH10. HERO.co.
This is
Make It Plain.
MIP
With Masamela Matfumo.
Mark Thompson.
Make It Plain.
Get woke.
Sisters and brothers, we have got to talk much, much more about environmental racism and environmental justice. We don't do it enough. None of us do it enough, but our sister does, and we do well every time we get an opportunity to hear from her. She is the Director of Federal Legislative Affairs for We Act for Environmental Justice. She testified before the House Energy and Commerce Committee today. We're very proud of her. No good. White member of Congress tried to mess with her. I'm going to deal with that. But we want to hear from her. Also, you know, the Biden administration came out and did some things just kind of in one fell swoop. Was this significant enough? And what do we need to do to follow up on that? So we're going to get into all of that with Kerene Tayloe, as I said, of We Act for Environmental Justice, better known as Green. Kerene in the house. Hey, sister, how you doing?
Hey, Happy New Year.
Same to you. Same to you. Happy 2021. You good? Family okay? How's everybody healthy and okay?
Everyone's good. Safe, working from home, going to school from home. Yeah, it's going to be a year now for the majority of us next month. So we're hanging in.
Yeah, well, that's good. That's good. Well, first of all, how was the hearing and what was kind of the outcome of that? Are you feeling that, you know, having, you know, going on the Hill testifying at a time when we have a new administration, is it a different vibe? Do you feel more hopeful, more optimistic, or just what?
Well, the hearing, and it was my first congressional hearing, and it was really just about what Congress can do, not only to support the Biden executive orders that came out on January 27th on climate and environmental justice, but what needs to happen immediately, just from the congressional standpoint. It was long. I was surprised that it was 3 hours, but it was a really good conversation. I was a panelist with Christy Goldfuss from the Center for American Progress, someone else from Blue Green Alliance. So it was a really good mix, I think, of folks. I was the EJ person, and it's always a challenge, I think, when asked to do these things, because our topic isn't a warm and fuzzy one. Like, we're going to bring up race. We're going to bring up, decades of disinvestment and pollution and how you've treated Black and brown people for years. And so it's not always a warm and fuzzy reception. But I think clearly with the Congress, with the White House, with us now having both the House and the Senate, there is an appetite for really frank conversations on what can happen. And I think today was the beginning of that.
And so again, what was Crenshaw trying to do?
Dan Crenshaw is a trip. You see people on Fox or wherever you see him the most, and then you interact with him. I guess he's new to this committee on energy. I think it's environment and climate change, the subcommittee. And he was just like, he was trying to get us all in a hole around natural gas and saying that it was helpful to addressing the climate crisis and that scientists agree with him. And that's totally not the case at all. Like natural gas is harmful and it does drive climate change. And as it relates to pollution in our communities, it's still impacting our health. And I tried to get that point in, and he was, eventually his last statement was like, my stepbrother's Latino, something like that. Like, what? No one knows. Like, what are you talking about? It was weird. It was super weird. But, when elections have consequences, so whoever elected him in his district, this is what they wanted. They wanted someone to, spew misinformation and to clearly come into hearings and throw him off.
The Biden executive orders, were you pleased with those? And to what extent did they intersect and support the initiatives of We Act for Environmental Justice, Kerene?
I'll say even before the executive orders, the transition to this administration has been so intense, where they've been wanting to hear our feedback on everything from what the EPA should look like, what Department of Energy should look like, transportation issues. Like, they've been very thorough. And so when the executive order came out on January 27th, and we read through it, we were like, oh, okay, they get it. Like, it was very strong in language. There are a lot of parts of it that we're excited about. There's the Justice 40 initiative, where they are making a commitment to provide 40% of the benefits to environmental justice communities. And we want to figure out, what do you mean by benefits and what will they look like? There's also going to be a White House Advisory Council on Environmental Justice, which we're excited about. There's even language about how the Department of Justice can create its own Office of Environmental Justice, which would be a first of its kind. So it was very, very comprehensive. There's also an opportunity to create a Citizens Climate Corps, a Climate Conservation Corps, which might be the green version of what happened during the New Deal, where there was the creation of the Conservation Corps. But unlike that, where there was a lot of racist practices in terms of who could get those opportunities, there's a real big emphasis on young people and people of color in that. So just a lot of different points of excitement, I think. And just frankly, not enough of Black media, I think, covered it. There were a lot of other executive orders that dealt with like racial equity. And, of course, we're still dealing with COVID, but the environmental justice community, Black and brown people, created, I think, this appetite for the Biden administration to talk about EJ the way that it does. And so we were pleased with it. But again, an executive order, it instructs the federal government how to act, the agencies. But until we get really strong legislation that is passed, that's when we're really going to see the teeth that are needed to really be more protective to communities.
Does the Democratic majority in the Senate make you feel hopeful about an opportunity for legislation to get passed?
Well, in today's hearing, I think Congressman Tonko talked quite a bit about his Clean Energy Futures Act. He and Congressman Pallone are introducing that. And there's some environmental justice provisions in that. But we typically pull up certain bills that we've been a part of for a very long time. Congressman Donald McEachin from Virginia and Congressman Rahul Grijalva from New Mexico introduced the Environmental Justice for All Act, which is something we've been a part of for a very long time. That's way more comprehensive. And it's something we're going to always say that people need to pass. So we're hoping that when it's reintroduced this year, that we can get it out of the House and get it into the Senate. And, maybe, our new VP, Kamala Harris, will be that deciding vote, because the Senate, it's going to take a little bit more work. We're happy that Senator Warnock and Senator Ossoff made it out of Georgia, but the realities are the Senate, because of the 50-50 split, will be harder.
So, you mean with people, are you alluding to people like Joe Manchin?
Yeah, he's the most powerful man in the Senate, they say. And he's, he has, with his interesting constituency from West Virginia, that's a very heavy coal state. But the realities are the industry has been dying for a very, very long time. And we do have to think about how do we make this transition and how do we, keep those communities with us. There's so many issues where a lot of these coal companies are going bankrupt on purpose so they can, avoid paying out those pensions. Folks get black lung disease. They give up their bodies to, work in that industry. And the federal government in many ways has failed them too. So how do we, of course, address the health issue for our communities and then keep those communities that have been working in the coal mines and natural gas and fossil fuels and all of that? How do we bring them along with us in an equitable way? It's going to be a challenge. It really is.
How does We Act for Environmental Justice also propose that as we address green initiatives, climate change, and all of that, that at the same time, we create jobs?
We have to. It's challenging. So we have our own solar program in Harlem. We've helped just in a couple of years, 125 people learn how to do PV, solar panel installation. We've helped over 2,000 people get their OSHA card so they could join the construction industry. But the challenge too, to be quite frank, is unions aren't always very kind to Black people. The union numbers aren't as high. And so while we talk about good paying union jobs, we also have to address the systemic racism that's existed in unions for a very long time. And so it's like a holistic approach. And the solar industry, the wind industry, they're producing so many jobs, but COVID, unfortunately, I think they lost like 12% of their the sector's jobs just within the year of that we've had the pandemic. So there's a lot of ground that needs to be made up for. And with the COVID relief package, there's opportunities to address that. But Congress is going to have to be very aggressive in providing the congressional incentives to really speed up the green sector.
So when we talk about solar and wind too, are we talking about union jobs there too?
The solar industry isn't as unionized, I think, as people would like it to be. So that's a challenge too. So that's going to take some work to unionize the solar industry. But there's other opportunities. I mean, the construction industry, which is pretty unionized, there's a lot of renewable jobs there in terms of energy efficiency or addressing building use of energy, et cetera, and even replacing all the lead pipes in the country, all of that. If we think about addressing Flint and all of the other places having water issues, there's a lot of potential there in that remediation process to create jobs.
So when we talk about the pandemic, we know that environmental racism has had disproportionate health effects on African Americans. Mm-hmm. So can we say also there's some overlap between COVID and health disparities from environmental racism that, in other words, our people are exposed to in a pandemic like this?
Yeah. I think it was Harvard. They had a study that recently showed the high correlation between particulate matter, which is a type of pollution that's created from transportation, et cetera, and emissions. If there's a high correlation between particulate matter in specific counties and then connected to high mortality from the COVID-19 pandemic. So it's directly connected. Air pollution, all of those things. If wherever there's more cases of people having asthma, having respiratory problems, chronic heart issues, et cetera, that are pollution related, there's going to be more likely high rates of COVID-19. So it's all connected.
We're talking about our local communities. You're talking about Harlem. How does rejoining the Paris Agreement impact our local communities?
I think rejoining Paris is more about the U.S. saying we're coming back into the world to be a part of the attempt to address the climate crisis. But Paris doesn't have any teeth to it, and we have to think further than Paris. How do we make stronger commitments, and how do we require states to really do the work to make those emissions reductions, whether it's, and sometimes the larger climate crisis is always seen through like greenhouse gas reductions, But in doing that, we have to think about the co-pollutants or the other pollutants that come with these emissions from these facilities and these power plants. And that's really where we can see the change for environmental justice communities. So Paris is a start, but Paris in itself needs to, that's just one step to really having the U.S. reclaim its leadership position, but we need to go further.
Now you use a big word, co-pollutants. So what are those? So there's greenhouse gas emissions and then co-pollutants. What are some of those co-pollutants that hit us?
Methane gas is really harmful. Nitrogen dioxide is really harmful. Ozone, so particulate matter, PM 2.5, all of those things. So when a coal power plant or any kind of stationary power plant is spewing all that stuff in the air, not only is greenhouse gas in it too, but a whole bunch of other stuff that makes those plumes even, darker. And so, our communities are closer in proximity to those facilities. So all of those fumes, all of those co-pollutants are coming up in our lungs, giving us all these respiratory problems, making our air dirty, impacting our water because, people think like air just stays where it is. No, air moves and it impacts people uptown. It impacts people downtown. So when we say co-pollutants, it's all the other types of pollutants in addition to greenhouse gases that go up into the atmosphere.
Of course, these executive orders mention environmental justice. You alluded to the White House Environmental Justice Interagency Council, the Justice 40 piece you mentioned. So is all of that really going to happen, or is that symbolic?
We hope it's going to happen. We're going to make sure, and we're going to work, I think, in coordination as much as possible with the White House, with the agencies to see it happen. I think we have a really small window for action. And again, January 27th, it wasn't even a full week. Those commitments were made, and we're going to hold the administration at their word. Our goal is to, figure out how to not only influence what the Justice 40 looks like in terms of on the ground investments and where it goes, but if we're able to influence the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council, do that as well. But there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and these agencies are staffing up, and we've tried to make our recommendations to some of these agencies as well. So we want to see more people of color there. We want to make sure that those people understand, and understand environmental justice, have a lens for equity. And I think not only do they need to be people of color, but they need to have, people that see and understand our issues too.
Yeah, because a lot of times when we see the face of environmental justice activism, there's still too many faces that don't look like yours and mine. Correct?
Yeah.
We need more of that, don't we?
Yeah.
We need more people from our communities who are at these tables being heard and addressing some of these issues. Tell people how they can get involved with We Act for Environmental Justice, if you would.
Sure. So you can find us on all platforms, Twitter, Instagram at We Act For, the number 4 EJ. And then our website is weact.org. And we have a membership meeting. If folks are in the New York, Harlem area, we have a membership meeting. I believe it's the second Saturday of every month. So the next one coming will be the 13th of February, and people are, welcome to come. It's all virtual right now. So if you're not even in New York, you can join and learn about our local and grassroots issues. But as it relates to the DC office where I work, we're just, it's like a light switch happened, and we're just doing so much with this White House than we've ever done before. So folks can just connect with us on our website, connect with us on Instagram and Twitter, and follow us and learn more about our programs there.
This was your first congressional hearing, you said?
It was.
And you slaying no good white dragons like that? I mean,
that was so weird. My knee was shaking. I was like, this man is crazy. But yeah, no, it was.
I never know. I said, well, she must done this 1,000 times.
No, it was my first one. Hopefully there are more opportunities to talk about environmental justice. And like you said, give a face to our issues. There are lots of Black and brown people, Indigenous people who've been doing this work for decades. And I'm thankful to, stand on their shoulders and share their work at this national level.
Yeah. Folks, also follow Kerene on her social media, Green Kerene, Twitter and Instagram. I follow on Instagram. I'll be on there looking at her page. And she said, look, you just ain't gonna come here and look at my page. You're gonna do some work too, brother. So and she's right. Pull me up too, because we need to do more of this. We're gonna have you back on a more regular basis. In fact, we need to schedule something regularly.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, so we can keep up with what's going on and all of us get an assignment. This is important too. And a lot of times we think we can keep putting it off. We cannot, because, time is catching up with us. We are behind in terms of emissions and everything. And the other thing the Biden administration did, of course, was, I think move all of the government's fleet of vehicles to electric. And I mean, that's not something that's going to happen tomorrow, of course, but that's where it's headed. And that's where we need to be headed if we are going to survive. A lot of things we fight for ain't gonna matter if we don't have a planet that's inhabitable anymore. Hello? So sooner or later, folks, we got to embrace this. Am I right, Kerene?
We got to. You're totally right, Red Mark. I appreciate those sentiments.
All right. So, folks, we act for environmental justice. Follow them. Follow Green Kerene. Again, weact.org. We thank you. Stay tuned right here, because we're going to stay on top of this. Oh, before I go, Black History Month. Are you able to share with us? Are there examples or precedents in Black history when it comes to the struggle for environmental justice and the struggle against environmental racism?
For sure. This week on the 11th will be the 27th anniversary of the signing of Executive Order 12898 on environmental justice. It was signed by President Clinton, but it reflected years of work of people like Bob Bullard, Beverly Wright, Peggy Shepard, and others in the EJ movement to kind of press for more federal engagement around environmental justice. Thinking about the Warren County protests there around, I think it was PCB or something like that. That's one of the first examples of really strong EJ activism. And even, frankly, the last act that Dr. King did in Memphis was an environmental justice act to protect the workers there in Memphis and to help them get better wages and have better working conditions. That's also an example of environmental justice. There's so many, and I appreciate the opportunity to share, because it is a part of our history.
And I want to lift up my brother, Dr. Benjamin F. Chavis Jr., who actually was the first to popularize the phrase environmental racism. And that woke a lot of us up. People like, racism, what's that? We call it. So that woke a lot of folk up back in the day. So we appreciate that as well. And our sister Kerene's picking up the baton in this generation and carrying it forward. weact.org. Thank you, Green Kerene.
Thank you. Thank you, River.
Thanks for getting woke and listening to Make It Plain. Please remember to listen, like, subscribe, and wherever you get your podcasts, please give the show a 5-star rating. And please do spread the word. Let's all continue to pray for each other during this pandemic and this police-demic. If all hearts and minds are clear, it has been made plain.
Be a barbecue hero with delicious, ultra-low net carb hero bread, buns, and tortillas. Soft and fluffy, high in fiber, and with 0 grams of sugar, up to 10 grams of protein, coming in at under 100 calories per serving. Oh, and did I mention they taste like their mouth-watering traditional versions? I mean, what's not to love? Use code AH10 for 10% off your first hero bread purchase at hero.co. That's AH10 for 10% off at hero.co.